This is my Traxxas TRX4 Sport, and it has been used and abused. It is beaten, it is dirty, it's rusty, it's nasty, and we are in the middle of completely revamping this thing. Step one, we went ahead and actually created a whole new body shell for it already. That video is already out. Today in this video, we're gonna go with a whole new chassis. My chassis, I dipped it in the salt water at the beach, and so now everything is a rusted, solid, nasty brown. So we are going with the Injora carbon fiber chassis kit. Comes with all sorts of stuff. So we need to get that open and see what that looks like. And as we're doing it, stainless steel screw kit from the RC Screws. Part of this whole transformation of my TRX4 Sport, rejuvenation, make the whole thing all brand new again. I'm going to get this started by getting this chassis kit out of the box and seeing kind of like, well, what the heck is actually in this thing. There is the two carbon fiber chassis rails themselves, looking really nice. You can see the layers in the carbon fiber there. Supposedly has a kick-up angle in it here to help you clear things. Different shock relocation points. Supposed to be pretty nice, actually. It has some of its own kit. It has some own hardware here, and I have no clue what this little plate is that's in the bag. This looks like a flat skid plate plus some other kind of maybe like a motor mount or something right there. So that's pretty awesome. Looks like side skids plus links. Ooh, look at this. I have all new ball ends and all new links. Looks like some of them are bent, so we'll have some high clearance links on there. They even have little flats on them so you can get to them with a turnbuckle. That's pretty sweet. Some standoffs, some more hardware, body posts, and it looks like a battery mount. Wow, all of this stuff. Seriously, everything in that kit, it was like $60 or something like that. I'll provide you a link down in the video description. But like, that's a lot of stuff. The links, the center skid, the chassis rails themselves, of course, all for like $60, $65, something like that. Now, the one thing that it doesn't provide in any of that is instructions. So we're gonna have to kind of work our way through it. And again, whenever possible, again, it looks like it comes with a number of screws already in the kit, which is really, really nice. And where it doesn't, I have the screw kit from RC Screws. This RC Screw kit is for a full TRX4. It's not for the Sport. Hopefully most of it will actually line up anyway. We have a little measuring tool in here, length in both inches and millimeters, so we can measure our screws if we need to. Cool. Comes with some Allen wrenches. Probably won't use those. I have an MIP set. Then, looks like kind of... this looks like cap head, this looks like countersink, and this looks like button head, and then our nuts. Not very sorted out here. In fact, I even see some like washers over here. Maybe need to be over there. Looks like if we're going to be really replacing screw for screw, it looks like I'm going to be doing some deep dive unless I really spread this all out. Now, looking on the Amazon listing actually gives you a little bit of better idea of how all this stuff might actually go together. Some of those links are two different length of wheelbase. Since this is the TRX4 Sport, I am going to want to go for the 313, the shorter wheelbase on that. It gives you an idea here that one of that little piece that I found is actually supposed to be for the pan hard rod on the front, so that is helpful. So by watching looking at some of the pictures here on Amazon, we get a little bit better idea of what in the heck we're supposed to be doing. Some of those crossbars help hold the chassis together. There you can see how the skid plate is, the side skids and then the center skid are supposed to actually mount up. Yeah, so turns out pictures are a little bit useful. They didn't provide any of the kit, so ability to reference back to the listing on here has been helpful. Here's where I've started so far. It looks like there's multiple mounting locations here. You can actually put the skid a little bit forward or back depending on what you want to do. I kind of just mimicked a little bit what the picture looked like and stuck it in one of the more forward mounting positions, which is, I'm assuming, good for shorter wheelbase and good for weight moving as much weight to the front as possible. So hey, look at that. It's almost starting to look like a chassis already. That is definitely a good thing. According to the pictures online here, some of these tubes that we have here then are just reinforcements that go across the front in places like here, places in the rear, maybe up here and up here. So I go ahead and bolt those on because I don't know what else to do. So we're going to do that next. This bag came with a bunch of screws and this other little bracket. I believe this bracket's supposed to be for the high-low 2-speed gearbox selector, so I don't believe I need it. And then all these other screws that I have no clue what they went to. The 9mm long button head screws are what I used to put the center skid and side plates on. Based on the pictures, this does look like this is the Panhard mount, and it kind of like forces itself. Ooh, I'm gonna have to really get into that. It forces itself into that slot, and then you put a nut on this side and a bolt through the back side in order to hold it all together. Now with this assembled, I think I have the bare bones of this chassis and what we're going to be using. My next steps are to start moving some of this mess, I think I'm going to start with getting the battery mount out of here and getting the motor and transmission and making sure that it actually bolts up. I've now made some pretty good progress here. So the chassis again is about where it was before, but added this front carbon fiber plate that was part of the kit. So you basically divorce the motor from the transmission, unlike how it was in the vehicle before, where it was kind of all in this one piece, along with the covers and everything. So the transmission mounts up very easily with the factory mounting screws, just like it had before in here. And then the motor just slides in, kind of like a fairly normal motor mount. You can very easily set the gear mesh based on any kind of gearing that you want to run, so no issue there whatsoever. Honestly, it's pretty nice. I like how it all sits. I think I want to get the axles out from underneath the old truck, get them cleaned up, maybe look at some bearings for them and things along those lines before I step into making the links. Remember, this kit does have 2 lengths of links, so you can use whichever length you need for your vehicle. I'll start looking at that once I get the axles out and start looking at how everything needs to go together. Drive shafts are looking great, all cleaned up. The rear drive shafts, honestly, these rear axles are basically stock. I never did anything to them. I think these inner portals are aluminum. Otherwise, I never really added weight to the rear. That's kind of my strategy. The front has outer brass but inner aluminum, and these C-hubs are actually aluminum, so the only extra weight is here. The front diff gear does have the overdrive in it, so that does give me some overdrive for the full vehicle. Otherwise, you can see these are actually they're kind of worn and beaten abused, but the diff covers are still the factory plastic diff covers and all that kind of stuff. So now it's on to making these links and seeing which ones go where. The one bag had more links in it than the other one. This one really only has 4. I'm guessing maybe it's actually the shorter link set. I don't know, actually, no clue. But when I dump all this out, it looks like all the link rod ends here are all the same. There's none that are like specifically offset or anything like that. So I'm just going to assemble all these and then figure out where I think they might go. With all the links made, I actually compare them to the stock links, and they don't really match up a lot, if I'm honest. But a couple things there actually does make sense. So when you look at the factory tray, you know, the links mount very inboard when it comes to it. This whole tray is very short. When you look over here, the tray is much longer. And the tray doesn't actually have anywhere to mount these links to. So unlike the factory vehicle where all the links are mounted to it, we're actually going to be mounting these links like to the chassis over here instead, which means we're going to end up with different length links in order to get the total wheelbase that we wanted either way. So you just kind of got to go for it. Now, do confirm on the pictures, at least from Amazon, that this set of longer links here is for the longer wheelbase. These should be for the rear of the shorter wheelbase, and these itty bitty tiny links will be for the front. This is my first shot as to where I think the different links should go and the lengths that they should be. And I don't think I'm happy with it, just so you know that for sure. I believe I've got the wrong wheelbase on here. I believe I've got it too long. I had to use the longer rear links in order to not have the drive shaft bind up. or I'm going to have to end up cutting the drive shaft short, which I'm fine doing that. On the front side, I use the exact links, the only links that they have in the kit, but it looks like I'm about to lose my dang drive shaft down here. So we have a couple different things going on here. I believe compared to the stock chassis, I believe that this actually sets this motor physically back more, which means yes, you're going to have to trim the drive shaft or do something. And then on this front drive shaft, we may actually have to put a longer piece. Maybe I need to mix and match front and rear pieces here a little bit in order to get it to work. But I believe the transmission is actually, relative to the axles, I believe the transmission is actually physically moved back a little bit compared to the stock vehicle. I'm actually not a fan of that. I want all this weight to be closer to the front as much as possible, so this I don't actually like. I'm not a big fan of it. The other part of it is there's no place on this skid plate to mount the links. So when you look at the factory kit, and it has some of these links mounting very inboard here, in order to get the proper angles and geometry, in order to truly, four link, as you can see it wants to do here, it wants to truly four link that rear axle. You just can't do it because you're mounting everything here to the side of the chassis, which, depending on what you're wanting, can be fine. It'll end up with this situation, it should end up with a crazy amount of flex. If you see this, it should flex a staggering amount. Guess what? That's probably too much. It's probably not what I actually really want in this vehicle. So this is step one. I'm going to get shocks on it. I'm going to try it. But I believe I'm going to have to find a way in order to put these shorter links on the rear in order to bring this axle in so that my wheelbase is actually correct for the body. And I don't know if I need to find some standoffs that I could use or something like that in order to bring some of these links in so that I can actually appropriately four link triangulate the rear end and control the movement of the rear end better. So it's going together. It looks fancy, but at the end of the day, I don't know if this is really actually going to be better or not for the truck. The other thing to note here is that I ended up having to use alternate hardware and lock nuts on all of these connections, front and rear. None of these are lock nuts and connections or bolts that came with the kit. So the hardware, these 2mm bolts plus the 2mm lock nuts, you're going to have a bunch of them. And there's 4 right here, 5, 6, 7 total lock nuts that I had to find, plus bolts long enough to go through here and hold everything. All of that was completely on me and not in the kit. So please be warned that if you are doing this, you need to have that on hand. I was just very fortunate that I happened to have enough laying around in my spare parts bins. At this point, I've actually given up on the Injora kit. I test fit the body and the axle was way too far back for any kind of body fitment, so I went with the shortest links that Injora provides on the bottom here, and then I just had to go into my spare parts bin and find some old leftover links that I wasn't using anymore and put those up here on the upper side in order to get this anywhere even close to where I think it should be. Clearly it's still not too right. We actually have a little bit of a pinion down angle, and as it goes it actually gains more, so I think I need to still bump these back a hole. But I want to wait until I get the shocks on and everything in order to figure out how that looks. In order to show you a little bit more about what I was talking about with drive shaft length, I had to take the center drive shaft piece out in order to fit this, and you can see how much the overlap is even at that spot. It has probably 1/4 inch of overlap, so clearly if I'm going to leave it like this, those drive shafts need to be shortened. Making a little more progress on the truck here. I still haven't cut the drive shaft down to length. That's going to be a process point here in just a minute. But up here on the front is where we've actually made some change. I have a Yaw Racing bumper that I decided to put on there, along with an ST Racing bumper mount, because I had used a different style over here on the old chassis. Had to reuse the servo mount that I had on the old chassis, because that's mostly is I don't know how they want you to mount the servo. I don't know if this stock servo mount is supposed to in theory work. It doesn't look like the holes would line up, so I'm not sure how you're supposed to, how they would ideally have you mount the servo. So I have these 2 brackets here. It's a bracket on either side, mounts on the outside of the frame, goes into the front bumper mount. I had to clearance that STRC bumper mount in order for the servo to fit. And speaking of the servos, that upside down 40, this is the brand new Zuske 40 kg 10th scale servo. So it should have plenty of power to turn the front axle on this truck. So that is all set up. I still don't have, of course, the servo linkage hooked up because I need power to the vehicle before I do that. But we actually do have a front end on the truck now, so that is a good thing. I'm going to turn my attention to the shocks, and I'm going to be using these recoil shocks from Friction RC. If you get them in the 90 to 85 millimeter spec, it actually comes in at basically the exact same length as the factory TRX4 shocks, and so I'm going to just be bolting them on as they come. Let's get them out of the box, let's get them out of the bag here and see what they look like. Man, those are some good looking shocks right there. Look at that. Those look pretty nice. I've never used these before. I do believe they come empty, so I'm gonna have to get some oil and I'm gonna have to fill them up here in just a second, but they are a very good looking shock. You have alternate rod ends here. I think this is how you can go from a long to a short rod end, and that will help shorten the shock overall. Looks like we also have our pivot balls and our mounting screws, which is very nice. And a spare set of springs, it looks like. When it comes from the factory, we have this dual rate spring setup here. It looks like if you wanted to go to just a single rate, parts are included there in the bag for it. Taking the caps off the shock here, they are beautifully set up with a O-ring right here around the top to help seal. That is awesome. Confirming, yes, indeed, they are absolutely dry from the factory. So I'm going to be using some Team Associated. I'm going to just start with some 30 weight Team Associated oil because I don't know what these shocks really need. There's no guidance for it. So we're just going to start there and see how they perform. We now have those great looking shocks on. Check those things out. They really do look quite nice. They feel pretty good. Obviously, we're going to need to end up finally tweaking the shock spring rate and the oil to the total weight and driving of the vehicle. It feels like right now maybe the rear is a little bit too stiff and the front may be not stiff enough. And so that may be something that we're going to have to work on here in the next steps. Well, clearly we need to get the truck up and running first. Please again note that I found these little standoffs right here that I am using. These back here that are being used are actually the ones that came with the Injora chassis kit, but I had to double up on them in order to space the shock out far enough so that it wouldn't rub the chassis as it articulated, which meant I had to again run through my spare parts bin to find a couple aluminum standoffs that did the same on the front to make sure that I did not rub. Used screws out of my RC screws kit in order to find ones that were the right length, along with some nuts here. Again, these nuts I believe were also already in the Injora kit. I'm going to go on to electronic mounting, and of course with the Fusion 2-in-1 setup there's not an external ESC that I need to worry about, but I clearly still need to have a place for the power button, and of course I need a receiver in it. And so what I am doing right now is I am taking apart my Dumbo RC receiver because I want to conformal coat it. It looks like it has a little bit of waterproofing on it from the factory, but I'm going to give it an extra good dose of this stuff from MG Chemicals. You just brush it on and it just provides a coating over the whole ESC board in order to truly make it waterproof. That's because in the old chassis we had a receiver box, waterproof receiver box for it to live in. On the new chassis, that's not going to happen. It's most likely going to sit over here next to the power button and everything's going to get plugged into it. The Injora chassis kit, these sliders do have some cutouts in them, and this is going to be really nice. I think I'm going to see if my 3S battery may actually fit over here. So I'll have electronics on one side, I'll have battery on the other. That is a good option. If I end up not wanting to do that, then it actually does have a little battery plate that can mount off of these two screws here on the transmission and mount a battery right here. Honestly though, that's pretty far back. I like and a little bit up. If I'm going up, I want to try to keep my battery forward. I may, depending on the battery I end up finally using in this, see if I can't create a little plate that sits right here behind this servo and and in front of this motor, and that may actually be a very good sweet spot for where the battery can live, especially if it's going to be a small. Injora provides a interesting looking little body mount system here. So you have this flat bracket, 2 screws, plus an oblong hole in it. The body post is an aluminum solid body post, and it goes down in here. Small little slit there in order to hit each one of the holes, and what that is you're supposed to use a body clip here and actually hit that hole, and that holds and adjusts your height. I guess it's rather simple, so it should be quite nice. I have test fitted 2 of them here, one in the rear at this location, and then one part of this whole shock mount, upper mount thing here. I still need to adjust the heights on them. Honestly, this is just a test, but the good news is it actually appears to fit the stock body mount. Future Troy edit here, as it turns out. So I was all excited about the fact that the front to rear spacing of the body post actually did align with the factory body holes, but what doesn't align is the factory body holes are spaced at about 70 millimeters center to center, and these are at like less than 60 center to center. So something is going to have to be done here, whether it's a different body mount in order to get it to still hit the factory holes, or is it going to be making new holes in the body right next to the factory ones? So I also looked at, can these be swapped to the outside, but at that point then they'd be like 100 millimeters apart, and so you'd be drilling new holes again. So factory, these Injora body posts do not actually line up all the way. They are lined up front to rear. They do not line up side to side with the factory body holes. We have steering. We have forward and reverse. Battery, my Ovonic 3000 3S fits here absolutely beautifully. Receiver installed with its conformal coating on. Power button on for the Fusion. Set up here from Hobbywing. So all I need to do now is finish tidying up all these wires. I think we have a finished chassis. There's still some stuff to be tweaked on, but at the end of the day, what we were looking at here is this Injora chassis kit. How does it look? Is it worth getting? And my honest opinion when it comes to this Injora chassis kit is maybe. I don't know at the end of the day if it's going to really provide me that much extra weight loss compared to the factory chassis and plastics. The goal is to gain, to lose some weight there with the total chassis in order to make the truck perform better. But clearly there's it might be moving the transmission back a little bit. Clearly there may be some issues with like the linkages that may need fiddled with a little bit. So is it a direct, absolute bolt-in, no questions asked? No, it is not, right? So you do need to do some tweaking and some refinement to it as you put it in. But if you're looking for a fancy chassis upgrade for your TRX4 Sport, then maybe it's actually a pretty decent deal because, it's $60-something. It comes with almost everything you need except for some hardware in order to get it all together. And you've got a new chassis with a lot less of the plastics and some other stuff relocated, and it's a worthwhile kit if you're looking to go down that path. That's my end of the day final thoughts on it. Now, I'm doing a lot more to this TRX4 Sport, so if you are curious about any of those things that I am doing, playlist will be popping up to your right over here. So go over there and check it out. See you in the next video. Thank you and goodbye.